We got it.
Very good. Well,
So thank you so much, David, for your patience there. Perhaps by means of just a quick introduction, I might just give a little bit of your background. So you completed your master's at Cambridge University, and also you did your PhD at Tasmanian University. And just to highlight some of the key roles, you were the rector at St John's College at Sydney University, president of Campion College Australia, which is Australia's first liberal arts college, and you're currently the director of the Christopher Dawson Centre. Yes, so thank you so much for joining me and willing to have this conversation around culture and education.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Michael, and congratulations on your initiative in setting that up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, perhaps we might just jump straight into it. I wanted to try to divide this conversation into three sections. First one, looking at education. Now, given your extensive experience and background in education, particularly in higher education, what are the challenges in education, particularly around the thoughts and the whole idea and philosophy on the purpose of education? And perhaps following that, if you've got any other thoughts on the curriculum in Australia.
Okay, huge question.
Yes.
I think education is something that's unique to human beings, isn't it? I mean, cats teach kittens to catch mice and to do some and clean themselves and things like that. But humans uniquely have needs that are far greater than anyone in the animal kingdom, and skills and talents that are go far beyond anything in the animal world. So education is trying to draw out, which is, I guess, the root meaning of the word, isn't it? The best of human potential, and prepare it for a productive life. So that's my first answer. Problems in education are diverse and huge. I mean, firstly, for example, we now have more material than we can possibly handle. There was a time when human beings had tiny libraries, and it was relatively easy to read everything generally available, only a few centuries ago. But now the amount of material available is simply staggering, so that even specialists can't get on top of their subject. There have to be specialties within specialties. So that's another huge kind of problem. And one of the results of it is, of course, that it pushes people into specialization prematurely. So we're getting people to learn too much about too little before they become familiar with the essentials. The 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. These should come first. When they're safely under our belt, as it were, excuse the mixed metaphors, then is the time to specialize, but not before.
And it must be difficult to discern what's actually worth reading and valuable to study, given the whole enormous wealth of information that's out there now.
Yes, of course. And there are a number of ways to deal with that. And for example, the American liberal arts colleges often go very much for the idea of the canon of great books. So you get the 100 great books or 1,000 great books or what have you. That's all very well, but they will be affected. The choice of those books will be affected by the culture you live in. An American's list of the great books will be very different from an Australian's list of the great books. And one of the things I liked about Campion College, and I love Campion College, of course, as you know, but one of the things I like about it is that it didn't go the great books route. Not as such. It went the route of the core subjects. In other words, the whole basis of Campion education was literature, history, philosophy, theology, the core subjects. And of course, there are certain great books that are always going to be read in a literature class. But they're not necessarily the same ones that are going to be read in an American literature class. There'll be a lot of overlap, but they won't be absolutely the same. The key, though, is looking at it's a bit like the trivium and the quadrivium in the Middle Ages, the basic subject. That's the focus. Learn to teach your students to communicate and to think straight. And then, in a way, it doesn't matter what books they read.
Yeah.
They will descend upon, they will turn up reading. There'll be a common readership. Everybody will read the Bible, for example, in a Christian society.
Mm.
And everybody will read Shakespeare, I think, in any society. We'd all be agreed on that.
Yeah.
Romans would all be agreed on Virgil and Cicero.
Yeah. Well, that might be a good place to segue to the next question. It seems to me that the humanities and the arts are currently undervalued. What are the benefits of studying the humanities and the classics?
Yeah, well, look, it's such a big question that you wonder why the question even needs to be asked, don't you? But when you think about it, almost everything we study is, in a sense, unnecessary. For example, there used to be a time when everybody was taught Latin, and then there's been a huge drift away from that, and everybody says waste of time, absolutely pointless, valueless to a modern world. Okay, well, that may be right. What about music? Everybody agrees that music is a good thing, but what does it actually do for us? Where is the value in that? What about mathematics? At the moment, science and maths have the ascendancy, but how many ordinary people actually need higher mathematics or need to know about nuclear physics? If I want a plumber, I'll call in a plumber. I don't have to be a plumber myself. There are a lot of things that aren't necessary, but we do them and we consider them part of a sound and complete education, which doesn't really answer your question at all, but it comes back to our humanity. That the fulfillment of our humanity demands of us that we use our talents and our skills, and that we understand the world we live in. And that means not just understanding it scientifically, but understanding it in a psychological and literal and poetic sense too, and a musical way. All of these wonderful things, and art and creative arts, they're all part of our humanity, and they're very important, even though we can't put a dollar value on them.
Yes, indeed. David, I might shift now to the second part of the conversation, which is looking at culture. And I'm going to ask another enormous question here. But if we were to sum up what is culture, what would you say there?
Yeah, that's a good one. But look, it comes back to humanity. And I'm sorry, I'm repeating the same thing, but animals don't have culture. The only animals that do are human animals. And that's everything to do with our life, which is not based on, I guess, feeding and immediate gratification, warmth, comfort, sex, procreation, and so forth. It's everything else in human life, anything that can be in human life, which is unique to humanity. So that to me is culture, and there are some bad cultures and there are some good cultures. A bad culture might be one, for example, that is centered on a religion that practices human sacrifice or cannibalism. Most of us would probably say that not a particularly good culture, and there are cultures that are directed towards creativism and the celebration of bravery and nobility, and devoted to beauty and art and making things and making beautiful things. So there's a huge answer there. But the answer is, I think, everything that humans do that animals don't do.
And if we could penetrate that a bit further, is there anything that you think underpins culture ultimately?
Well, yes, I do. To my mind, the greatest single proof of the existence of God is the uniqueness of humanity. Evolution might go some way to explaining human beings. I don't know. I'm not jury's out on that as far as my jury's out on that. I don't know. I'm sympathetic to the notion of evolution, I suppose. But it doesn't explain the enormous gap between humans and even the highest animals.
Mm-hmm.
Language and the sense of one's own existence, the awareness of one's own existence. So, to my mind, human culture is closely tied to God.
Yeah,
it's to do with the divine in us.
I see. And if we're to look at, I guess perhaps our own culture, what would you say some of the challenges are?
Selling ourselves short.
Yeah.
So if we just say human beings are animals, they're higher animals, they come somewhere on the scale of animal life, and we should perhaps move over and give the animals a better chance, and we should become vegans, and whales and dolphins are highly intelligent, and they should be given every consideration. All of those things, I don't mean to be unkind or heartless, because I actually love animals, but we have to recognize that there's a difference, and that our obligation is to rule our universe as stewards of God, and to care for creation. So yeah, sure, I'm a bit of a greenie in that respect, I think, but we fall short if we sell humanity out and pretend that it's just a sort of kind of animal life, and maybe there are too many of us, and maybe we should make room for others.
Even in that line of thinking, there seems to be some inconsistencies where some circles would champion more rights for animals than for ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Well, how many people are worried about abortion, and how many people are worried about koalas? I leave you to answer those questions.
and perhaps on the flip side there, David, what are some of the unique elements in Western culture that are worth preserving and even defending?
Well, no, that's a catchy one, because in a way, Western culture divorced from Christianity is not all that impressive. Christianity's been the most the biggest is the biggest component of European culture, and once we deny that or pretend it didn't happen, then we're worth no more than any other culture. Everything great in Christianity and in Western culture has been Christian, but Christianity is not unique to Western culture. And the epicenter, the center of the Christian world for 500 years was the Middle East. Christopher Dawson said that Christianity is not the possession of the West or of the East or of anybody else. It's common to all humanity. We've given it a particular style. It's taken root in the West mainly because it was locked out of the East for a long time. And so we've, I suppose, hosted it, maybe you could say, in the West for 1,000 years or more. But all the really great things of the West came out of Christianity, and I mean art and music. I mean, think of Bach's music and Mozart's too, and think of the great art, and think of the great poets and how influenced they were by Christianity. Dante and Shakespeare too, I think, very much so, very much so. So that's what the West is the Western culture is essentially a Christian culture with its own peculiar stamp. But there's nothing special about the West, and it really upsets me when people say, rather patronizingly and racist, really, that say we shouldn't be trying to set up democracies in the Middle East because they're not used to that way of thinking. Well, damn it all, we didn't have democracy until 150 years ago. It's new to us too.
Listen.
And it's simply patronizing to say that, or to say you can see why Hitler took power in Germany because the Germans are so naive. After what's happened during the lockdown, you can see how naive we are and how ready we are to obey the orders of our leaders.
Mm.
So there's nothing magic about the West. Everything that's great about it has been Christian. Sorry, that's a mess, but I think that's my.
No, well, I mean, I think the study of many of the institutions that are in the West have their roots in Christianity, like even universities and hospitals, charities.
Schools, the whole educational system and the law, and philosophy.
Yes, but of course that has its basis, as you say, in Christianity. So
Yeah.
yes. Well, you did mention there earlier Christopher Dawson. It might be a good opportunity to further talk about the centre, but before that, pose the question: why Christopher Dawson? Who was he?
Well, who was he? He was a very great English historian. He began life as an Anglican. He became a Catholic. I don't count that as a particular merit. He would have been absolutely as great whether or not he had made that change, but it's a fact. And it's one of the reasons why a Catholic organization like the Dawson Centre would choose him as our hero. C.S. Lewis, by the way, didn't become a Catholic, but we all love him dearly.
And forgive him.
But Dawson was a man who saw what happens when a society loses its religious conscience. And he recognized the evils of Nazism and fascism on the one hand, and godless Marxism on the other. And from our perspective as Christians, it seems to me that once you go far enough to the left, you end up on the right. And once you go far enough to the right, you end up on the left. And there's not a lot between them, between the dictatorships of the world, whether they be fascist or Marxist, And Dawson, I think, could understand that and see us as walking a narrow path between atheistic extremes on the left and the right.
Mm. And well, could you tell us a little bit about the centre then?
Yes, founded on the initiative of Archbishop Porteous. When he came here in 2013, came to Hobart in 2013 as Archbishop, he very kindly asked me if I would work with him to advance the good name of the Catholic intellectual tradition. So we hit on the idea of a sort of a centre for cultural studies, sort of a think tank, I suppose. And the Archbishop said, just one favour, would you mind naming it after Christopher Dawson?
Twist my arm.
What a wonderful thing. My dear friend Carl Schmuder would have been thrilled to bits.
Yes.
In college, and is a great champion of Dawson. So that was the reason. Now we work from the end of the world, as it were, and we do our best to bring speakers to Tasmania. But our newsletter has an international and mainland readership, and we try to impact the culture wars from our own particular perspective. I'd like to think that we do it with a charitable and peaceful way as far as we can. There's a hard fight to be fought, but it can be fought with chivalry and without dirty tricks. So I'd like to think that we would argue for the value of conservative things, the value of conservatism, without being right-wing, certainly without being left-wing either. It's not necessarily the same thing, I think, to be a conservative and to be a right-winger. So I would like to say that we would be a conservative organisation, but not right-wing.
Yeah, sure. It's a good distinction as well. And how would one, say, subscribe to the newsletter there or learn more about the centre?
Yes, it's all free. I mean, we have about, 1,000 readers at the moment, that's all. So it's just a case of letting us know by email. And the address is director@Dawson Centre. That's spelled in the English, not the American way. DAWSONCENTRE.org. director at dawsoncentre.org.
Terrific.
Contact any.
I'll put that up on the clip too. So, and perhaps strategic wise, what are the future plans for the centre? What are the next steps there?
Well, we always had an annual conference, and COVID put paid to that for 2020.
Yes.
So we hope to have a bumper conference in 2021. It's always been in Hobart. I think the next one will also be on Zoom. We might as well move with the times. So it'll be an actual conference, but also with a Zoom component, I think. Then apart from that, we're working hard on, I have a wonderful assistant called Naomi Spinks. You probably know her, but she maintains the Facebook page, which is a really good presence. She does a great job with that. And she also produces the newsletter for us. I write it, she sends it out. She sometimes guest edits it too. Reaching more people is our goal, either directly or at conference or by email.
Terrific. Well, David, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been wonderful having a conversation with you, and I hope that we're able to have another opportunity in the near future to discuss other elements within our culture and civilization.
Thank you, Michael, and congratulations to you on your initiative, and thank you very much for supporting us on ours.
It's been a pleasure. Excellent. Thank you, David.
Bye.
Bye.